Welcome back to the Made2Homeschool Podcast. My name's Brandon, and my wife Brigitte and I are the founders of Made2Homeschool. In this episode, I had the opportunity to interview Yvette Hampton. Yvette Hampton is the producer and host of the documentary Schoolhouse Rocked, The Homeschool Revolution, and the Schoolhouse Rocked podcast. She loves Jesus, and her greatest joy is being a wife and a mom. She and her husband Garrett have a passion for strengthening and equipping families and the homeschool community by teaching parents how to live out their convictions, educate their children, and point them to Christ. This is the third part of our three-part conversation with Yvette, and I think that everyone listening can find challenge and encouragement in Yvette's story. Let's get into it. So Yvette, as we wrapped up our last part of this conversation, we had hit on a lot of stuff. One of those that I want to come back to and then do that and come back then after that to kind of just you as a homeschool mom in your journey personally, was this journey you took on a road trip and created a film together with your husband Garrett, and it's so encouraging and so valuable. I think people need to watch it. When you finally released that wasn't the end of the journey, because you'd already started this podcast journey, and you went from like new homeschool parent over the course of like 7 years, I think you said, to all of a sudden, I think a really helpful voice in homeschool advocacy.
Yeah.
What made you guys go, you know what, this is not just a thing we love, this is our career and this is our mission?
Yeah, it just kind of happened. I talked about how the Lord kept putting all these different obstacles in our way, but good obstacles, I guess, as we were making the movie, and that one, the big one, of course, being the podcast. And we had no idea. Again, it kind of goes back to the dream where the Lord was just saying, just trust me, I'm writing this story. And we could not have imagined that we would be doing what we're doing today. And Schoolhouse Rocked is our full-time ministry now. That's what my husband does full-time. He produces the podcast, and he does stuff with the movie and the blog. Like, it's all Schoolhouse Rocked ministry. We have an online conference that we've done twice. We will do it again in the future, not this coming year, but we'll possibly do one again next year. And so that was another obstacle, actually, was we did this online conference. And this was so crazy. This was in February of 2020. So it was right before COVID hit. And we did that conference as a fundraiser for the movie. And it was the first time we'd ever done an online conference. It was live and interactive, and it was super fun. And so we had Heidi St. John and Kirk Cameron and Rachel Carmen and Ginger Hubbard and Dorinda Wilson and a whole bunch of just big names in homeschooling. And this conference went so well. And it was literally like 3 weeks later that everything shut down. And all of the conferences, most of the conferences, like 90% of the homeschool conferences that year got canceled. And so the Lord provided this online conference that we did. And it was kind of funny because a bunch of those conferences then went online and did their thing, but we had already done ours. And the Lord just was like, okay, here's another one. And so that was a huge fundraiser for the movie, and it went really well, and it was really fun to do that conference. So there were all these things that the Lord he just did it. I mean, there's not even a better answer than that, but that the Lord just put all of these things in place with the podcast and the conference and the whole ministry. Because we just set out to make a movie. Like, that's just what we were going to do. And then we didn't know from there what we were going to do after that. And so, yeah, and then we have another podcast too, the Homeschool Insights podcast, which is, it's 5 days a week, and Garrett takes like the power clips from all of the main podcasts that we have. And those are like 7 to 10 minute just bursts of encouragement each day of the week. So 5 days out of the week. And so, yeah, the Lord just built it. I can't even say, oh yeah, we sat down and we had this great plan. And, I mean, you can have a business plan and try to map out what your whole life is going to look like and what your business is going to look like. And yes, we should plan and we should pray and have some things in place, but really it's just trusting the Lord and letting him see where he takes stuff, just like he's done with Made2Homeschool. I mean, you guys are doing the same thing where you just took a leap of faith and the Lord was like, okay, let's go. This is what we're going to do. And he is really blessing your ministry with Made to Homeschool, the people that he's brought to you, the contributors, the members. It's so cool to see what he's doing. And, when we spoke with you the other day, you're like, it's just happening. And when you look at what you've done, I mean, I told Garrett, I said, I am so impressed with all they've accomplished in the last few months, but that's the hand of God at work. And so
It ain't me, sister. I'll tell you that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. The Lord just does his thing. He's writing these stories.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And honestly, as you're speaking, I'm thinking, yeah, I get that. And
Yeah.
it's such an encouragement, though, honestly, Yvette, because you don't know. When you take that step out in faith, it's only a step of faith because you don't know what's on the other side of it.
Right.
And I think that your story for us is an encouragement, really. And I really think it will be for a lot of other people. One of the things we talked about as you were going back to your homeschool mom life,
Yeah.
you talked a little bit about figuring out curriculum choice and focusing on Christian curriculum. There are two things that I hear as subjects from our contributors from the homeschool world more than I think anything else. They're hot buttons. I'll ask you about both curriculum and socialization. So on the curriculum side, what has been your process for figuring out what works for you? Is it different for every kid? Is it different for every season? You don't have to pick on a specific company as your favorite release or any of that if you don't want to.
Yeah.
But I think that one of the biggest searches every single year around February to April is homeschool curriculum.
Yeah.
And people want to know. So what would you tell them?
So yeah, we, in the beginning, it was so funny. We went to that first conference and we went to all the booths and we picked what seemed exciting and made sense. Thought, okay, this would be good for homeschool. And it seemed like it was the ones with all the worksheets. Cause that's for some reason what I thought we needed to do. We have to sit down at the table and we have to fill in the blanks. Like that's what school was.
I'm struggling with that too, actually, as we're preparing. I'm like, oh, I need worksheets.
Right. Yes. Well, my oldest hated worksheets, still does. She hates to fill in the blanks. It is just not her thing. But she is crazy smart and she remembers things without having to fill a blank in. And so we pretty quickly started learning that just reading good literature, the first major thing I read to my kids. I did not grow up as a reader. I did not like to read. As a matter of fact, I just wrote an article yesterday for a publication about read alouds and how I hated reading aloud as a kid because I was so insecure about it and I would stumble on words and, mess up the inflection. Like I just hated reading aloud in the classroom. So even when my kids were little, I didn't enjoy reading aloud to them in the beginning. It scared me for some reason. I'm like, she's like 1 and I'm afraid to read a book to her. But very quickly we became a reading family. And so the first major series I read was the Little House on the Prairie series. I did not, this will tell how I was growing up. I seriously did not know that Laura Ingalls Wilder was a real person who wrote a real book series called Little House on the Prairie. I thought it was just a TV show. I mean, that's like telling me that, Friends was actually about real people or, that just was absurd to me. And so we read the Little House on the Prairie series. And that was really kind of what launched me into falling in love with reading to my girls, reading good literature to them. And so we read a lot. We love to read books together. My oldest is, she's going to be 18 in a couple of weeks. And my youngest is 13 and we still read together. I still read to my 18-year-old and 13 and together. Like we always read together, the three of us. It's so much fun. We've done it their whole lives and I love it. So reading is a big part of it. But then I like curriculum that is more like personable, where I feel like I'm part of the story, where it's not just a textbook. And so we've loved The Mystery of History is great. We love Apologia. We're actually really good friends with Rachel and Davis Carmen. And I love their curriculum. I love how it's written. We love Master Books is another one that just has and all of these are just really good, strong biblical worldview. BJU Press has some really great curriculum for different things. And so we're super eclectic. We've used IEW for writing, Institute for Excellence in Writing. We love them for writing. I like it because Andrew Pudawa teaches my kids through video and I don't have to do it. And so we've used that for different years. Every year it's different for us. And so it just depends on what we're doing that year, what the needs of my kids are. We have picked up curriculum many times where we'll use it and my girls are like, I'm just not getting this. And I'm not afraid to put it down. I'm not one of those moms who feels like, well, we got this curriculum, we have to use it. The same with a book. We started reading several weeks ago, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And we read the first maybe chapter of it. And all three of us were like, this is a weird story. Like we were not enjoying it. And so the girls were like, can we find a different story? And, maybe it's the type B in me. I'm not a type A. I was like, yeah, let's throw this one aside and grab another book that we'll enjoy, because I want to enjoy what I'm doing with them. And so that's really the big thing is like, are we learning from it? Is it pointing us to God's word and to his truth? And is it just enjoyable for us, or is it bringing us together as a family? And so that's kind of what we use. That's kind of my thing that I use for curriculum.
Well, what I love in that is that, it's not just about being eclectic, but it's like, no, you figure it out. Like you try a thing. If it doesn't work, it's too hot, too cold, or just right. And you move on from there. And I think that just comes back to giving more freedom to parents. Like it's okay to not like something.
Yeah.
It might be great for some other kid, not for yours.
Totally. And part of the greatest blessing of homeschooling is that we get to learn what our kids' learning styles are. So, I have one who's more visual and one who's more auditory. My oldest daughter, she is very much an auditory learner. And so when she was in maybe, I think, third grade, she did Bible Bee through our Awana, club at church. And so she could read, but she didn't want, she had a hard time memorizing by reading. And so I literally just on my phone, I recorded all of the scripture with the references that she was supposed to memorize, everything that she needed to memorize for Bible Bee. And she got second place in Bible Bee that year. And she didn't read it one time. She just listened to it. And she would listen to it over and over and over again while she was playing with Legos or playing with her dolls or doing whatever. She would just listen to it and she learned it because she's an auditory learner. And so we get to know our kids. And when our kids are in a classroom, there's no teacher in the world who can possibly meet the needs of every individual child and their learning style. And with homeschooling, we have the opportunity to do that with our kids. We figure out how they learn best, and then we cater their learning to fit them.
That's so interesting. I think learning styles in general as a study is intriguing. I think I'm very much a visual or kinesthetic learner.
Yeah.
But as you say that, I will confess, even as having been in full-time ministry for so long, I would struggle reading from like First Kings through First and Second, and then First and Second Chronicles. I struggled with that, but I could listen to it like nobody's business, and I would actually take more away from it listening to it as long as it was a deep British man's voice. It had to be one of those. And then he said unto the people, like it had to be one of those, right? But I can take more of it listening, so that's really actually interesting. I'm going to ask you in just a second about the thing that homeschool families I know we're just sick and tired of hearing about. It's how do you kids get socialized?
Yeah.
We're going to take a quick break, come right back, I'm going to ask you about that.
Education is discipleship, and this is something I didn't understand until I was probably 3 years into homeschooling. The Bible teaches us in Luke 6:40 that when a student is fully trained, he will be like his teacher. And as we look around the culture right now, I think it begs the question, who is teaching our children? Who is teaching our children, and what are they teaching our children? And to me, the primary benefit of having my children home with me is I am able to impart my worldview to my children.
Okay, Yvette, now I get to ask you about socialization. I know people are tired of hearing about it because it's like your kids won't be socialized right. I've heard a million thoughts about this. It's not a concern I have. But I will say it's become such an annoyance in the homeschool world. People almost like ignore it.
Yeah.
And I think it does have to be an intentional thing on our part.
Yeah.
That our kids are well socialized amongst all age groups as well.
Yeah.
How has that been for you? Was it hard? Have you had to be very intentional about it? Share that with us, if you will.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, the whole socialization thing, because people still do ask that question. And I find that it's typically the older generation who asks it. And I'm talking typically 60 and up, because they still are in that mentality of, our kids are not going to be socialized and they're going to be weird and awkward. To which I would say to them, If you want to learn socialization in a public school, go park yourself in the middle of a mall, any mall, anywhere in America, see how the kids act and dress, and then tell me if you want my kids to act and dress like those kids. Socialization today in most of America, not all of America, because there's some really rural areas that don't have big homeschool communities and stuff, and there's not a lot of opportunity for socialization. But across the board, for the most part, most areas have some sort of homeschool support group or co-op or community that they can be involved in. And if there's not, it's likely that there are other homeschool families in your area who are looking for that as well. And so we have found it really important for our girls. As a matter of fact, both of our girls do a co-op this year, and they go together and they love it. And most of the classes that they're taking are elective type classes like culinary and art and things like that. They're both taking a Bible class because I wanted them to get some Bible instruction training. It's taught by a pastor, a local pastor. And so my oldest is doing New Testament survey and my youngest is doing how to study the Bible. And so they're learning from, another voice who is trusted. And let me tell you, I vetted all of these teachers. They're just individual, like kind of a la carte classes, but I looked into every parent who was teaching these classes before I put my girls in these classes, but they love it. And the reason they really love going is not for the classes themselves, but because they have made friends there. And even, my oldest, she's graduating with this co-op that we're part of. It's a big co-op kind of support group. And there's like 57 kids in her graduating class this year. And so we're doing an actual big like graduation ceremony with all of the kids. And it's the real thing, they got cap and gowns and all that. They have prom, that my daughter has gone to prom the last couple of years. And it's fun for her to be able to kind of still have that like high school, what we would call a normal high school life. They go to football games. We live in the Tulsa area. So we live in an area that has a huge, thousands and thousands of homeschool families. So we have an entire homeschool football team and basketball team. So, we have lots of resources here, but even for people who live in smaller towns, they do need to be socialized. They need, and being in church, of course, though I do not count on any youth pastor ever to be the one to disciple my children, I think it's good for kids to be part of a youth program. Many people would disagree with that. It depends on the youth program that they're part of. But, there are people who say, no, youth groups are bad. Well, I think it's good to have other people speaking into the lives of our kids, people who we trust, but other people, because they'll hear the same things oftentimes that we're saying to them as parents from someone else. And they're like, oh, yeah, that's true what you just said. I'm like, I just said that same thing. They're like, yeah, but it's different when Miss Carrie says it, or, So yeah, I think it's good and healthy for our kids to have interaction with other trusted Christians, and then to be in positions where they can make other Christian homeschool friends. But let me say one more thing on that. I think strongly because of COVID and because so many people have brought their kids home, it used to be that most people who homeschooled were strong, solid Christians who were running towards something, like they really had a goal in their homeschooling. Today, it's become very different for a lot of people in that they're running from something. They're running from the public schools, but they don't know what they're running to. And so it really has changed the face of homeschooling a lot in the last few years, in that people will say, oh yeah, we're Christians. And what they mean by that is I'm an American, therefore I'm a Christian, or I believe that God is real or something like that. So therefore I'm a Christian. And so a lot of non-Christian, non-churched kids have started to mingle with the Christian homeschool kids. So it really has changed the dynamics of homeschooling a lot in the last few years. So we do need to be cautious of where we're putting our kids, what kind of co-ops they're being involved in and support groups and things like that. But yeah, socialization it's important for them. They need that. They need to know how to interact with other people.
I think that's really fair-handed, because you're not saying, it's not a problem. You're saying, yeah, it's important and you have to work at it, but it's also really doable in almost every situation.
Yeah.
I think that people need to hear that. All right, a few rapid fire things here, Yvette.
Sure.
1, what has been your greatest unexpected hurdle as a homeschool parent?
For me, it's probably been time management and I don't know that it's been unexpected, but I am a procrastinator. I just am through and through. I wait till the last minute to do just about everything. It drives my husband crazy. I don't do it on purpose. It's just I just do, and yeah. And so time management for me has definitely been a hurdle that I'm still trying to get over, of, just getting all the things done that is reasonable in a day, but somehow the day seems to get away from me. And so I have to oftentimes put practices in place, like, okay, I've got to put my phone down, and I'm not scrolling through Facebook all day long, but I'll get phone calls or emails that I need to answer, things like that, mostly because of Schoolhouse Rocked. But I need to oftentimes just put it away. Like, okay, I cannot listen to my phone ding one more time because I'm reading a book, and then all of a sudden my phone is chiming and stuff. So yeah, time management and not procrastinating on things has been a big hurdle for me.
What about on the other side? What has been your greatest unexpected, and no, I can speak words, unexpected blessing for you and your family in the homeschool journey?
Oh, hands down, my relationship with my girls. I never imagined that at 13 and 18 years old, I would have the relationship that I have with them. And, aside from my husband, my girls they're my besties. I love being with them most of the time. I mean, we have hard days, as everyone does, but I genuinely love being with my kids. And I thought one of the reasons that I said I didn't ever want to homeschool before I had kids was because I used to think, like, why would I want to be with my kids all day, every day? They would drive me crazy. And what I've learned about that is that the parents who say I couldn't handle being with my kids all day, every day, is because they're not the ones raising their kids. They're being raised by a school system. They're being raised by teachers. They're being raised by someone else who's not them. So you probably don't like your kids because you're not the one raising them. And my kids are not perfect by any means. And I'm not the perfect mom by any means, but we genuinely enjoy our time together most of the time. And I love the relationship that I have with both of my girls.
That is absolutely beautiful. I love that. And I believe we'll get that. And I hope that will stick for our family, because that's the dream for us.
Yeah.
Is our kids loving each other 50 years from now.
Oh,
and loving
yeah.
us still. That's amazing. A couple other quick things. What would you say to a homeschool mom listening to this, who's listened to all three parts of this conversation now, Yvette, and they're just sitting there like, oh, but I don't know if I can. I have a million circumstances that make it hard. I just don't know. What do you have to say to them?
I would say Matthew 6:33 says, but seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. Seek God first. He knows what you need. He knows what your kids need. And to think that someone else will teach them better is a totally, that's just, I think I said this in part one. No one loves your kids more than you love them. And we talk about this in the movie. Israel Wayne actually says this. I always feel like I'm repeating his lines, but no one loves them more than you love them. No one knows your kids better than you know them. No one knows their weaknesses, their strengths, their needs. No one's going to discipline your kids the way that you're going to discipline them. You are the best teacher for your child, hands down, no matter what. And that doesn't mean that you're going to teach them the best way of science or math. Math is a great example for me. I hate math. Legitimately, I hate math. So you know what I do? We have an online math course. We use CTC Math for our kids, and I let CTC Math teach math to my kids. But don't believe the lies that you're inadequate and that you are incapable of teaching your kids, because you're the one who is responsible for it. Psalm 1 is one of the verses that we sit on a lot. And it says, blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked. So think public school and many private schools, nor stands in the way of sinners, nor sits in the seat of scoffers. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. And our kids cannot meditate on the law of the Lord day and night if they're not with us, and if we're not the ones pointing them to Jesus. And so you are the best teacher for your kids, even when you're failing, even when you're struggling, even when they're struggling. God has given them to you to be their teacher. Luke 6:40 says, a disciple is not above his teacher, but everyone, when he is fully trained, will be like his teacher. And so that's a scary verse, because that means that our kids are going to grow up to be like us. We're the ones teaching them. But that is a high calling that God has given us, is to teach our kids to have wisdom, to have discernment, to look to the Lord for all things. And so he's going to give us what we need. So, you're going to feel inadequate, but what I've learned is that I am absolutely inadequate to teach my kids. And the greatest part of that I've learned is because of my inadequacy, because of my inability to teach, because of my inability to always have the patience that I need and the wisdom that I need and the discernment that I need. All of that comes from the Lord. And in the very end, I am not going to be able to look back and say, look at what an amazing homeschool mom I was. Look at how great I was at mothering my kids and at teaching them. I'm only going to be able to look back and say, look what the Lord did, because he was faithful. And then he gets all the glory for it. I get none of it. And I think he has us in this place for a reason where we get to feel like, I can't do this, Lord. And we have to lean on him. And then he gets to be the star. He gets to, Jesus is victor. I mean, he will do with us and with our kids through our obedience and through our mistakes and through our sinful hearts. He's going to accomplish his will through us if we're obedient. And all we have to do is say yes and be willing to do it.
2 more quick things, Yvette. One, what is an opinion you have about homeschooling that you think ruffles feathers in the homeschool world?
Well, I don't know, because I'm a little bit, I think sometimes different than some homeschoolers in that I'm a much more relaxed homeschooler. There are some homeschoolers who are very organized. They have their schedule in place and they do X, Y, and Z every day, and they know exactly where they're going, what they're doing. I said I'm kind of an eclectic homeschooler, but I'm also more of a relaxed homeschooler in that and a lot of it is just my personality. We don't stick to a very strict schedule. I let my girls sleep in a lot because I've learned that if they're tired, they're not going to learn very well and they're not going to have good attitudes. And so I'm not the mom who's like, okay, we're going to start school every day at 8 a.m. and we're going to learn for 2 hours and then take a break. So we often are doing school at like 7 o'clock in the evening, 8 o'clock in the evening. I mean, it is not unusual for my youngest, especially, to be sitting on the sofa at 8 p.m. writing a paper or doing something like that or doing her math. But I'm okay with that. I mean, the work is getting done and, we're going to get done what we are going to get done in a day. And I just am not one who sticks to a really strict schedule. And so I think a lot of moms kind of cringe at that and go, oh, that wouldn't work for me. And if it doesn't work for you, then stick to your schedule. That's just not how I work. That's not how my girls function very well. So
I think people need to hear that, though. I think that's a really great response. I think people hear a lot today about the systems they have to put in place, about the schedules they can use, and all the many planners they can buy. And those are valuable tools, absolutely. Yeah. But I also think it's important for people like you, and I think a little bit like me, for whom that's not natural, to know that they too can do it. And it's okay to be a little different in the way you go about it. The end result being that your kids are educated with things they need to know and the Lord they need to know.
Yeah.
And
Amen.
So I think that's a really helpful response, actually. All right, last one, Yvette.
Sure.
Why are you doing this? What's your why? What's your foundation? What's driving you?
I think that is such an important question. And it's one that I've had to really kind of think through from the beginning. And our why has changed a lot. When we first started homeschooling, it was in the very, very beginning, it was a safety thing, like a physical safety thing. But as the years have gone on and as I've realized the importance of God's word in my kids' lives, Ecclesiastes 12:13 has become my life verse. It says, the end of the matter, all has been heard, fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. And that's it. Like, that's the whole duty of man. Fear God and keep his commandments. That's it. That's the end of it. That's what we're to do with our kids. That's what we're to do as ourselves. And so for me, like, I'm trying to be obedient to the Lord in teaching my kids about him and educating my kids about him, because truly, as it says, the end of the matter, all has been heard. In the end, when our kids come face to face with the Lord, he is not going to care how well they did in math. He is not going to care what kind of grade they got in economics. He is not going to care how many science labs they did. None of that is going to matter. What he's going to care about is, did they fear him and did they keep his commandments? And that's what is going to matter for me too. He's going to ask me, what did you do with these children that I entrusted to you? And I want to be able to hear from him, well done, good and faithful servant. Like, that is what I want. I want my girls to hear, well done, good and faithful servant. And so that is my goal in life right now is to fear God, keep his commandments. That's the whole duty of man. That's my whole duty as a human. And I came across several months ago this Latin phrase. It's called coram Deo. And I didn't know what that was. I had not heard of that before. And I was like, coram Deo? I don't know what that means. So I looked it up, and it says this, coram Deo is to live one's entire life in the presence of God, under the authority of God, to the glory of God. And I feel like that's a good way to just sum up Ecclesiastes 12:14. And again, it's to live one's entire life in the presence of God, under the authority of God, to the glory of God. And so that's my goal. That's my life. I want to live my life to the glory of God the best that I can. And for right now, this season in my life, I believe that is through homeschooling my girls, pointing them to Jesus, and doing Schoolhouse Rocked, being part of this ministry, having the movie, which people, by the way, I don't know if we said this, but it's free. People can stream the movie for free. Doesn't cost them a penny. SchoolhouseRockedMovie.com, or they can find it on our website, SchoolhouseRocked.com. But the movie, the podcasts, everything that we do is to help parents and equip them to be able to live coram Deo.
Yvette, I think that's a tremendous place to wrap up. People can find you, see you, hear you at schoolhouserocked.com.
Yes.
Yep.
Yep.
And on
That's
social channels, I know Facebook is big, Instagram, Twitter, all the things.
Yeah. Definitely Facebook is where we're most active as far as social media, but everything we have is on the website, schoolhouserocked.com, or again, the movie they can stream directly through schoolhouserockedmovie.com, stream it for free.
Yvette, I think people are going to be getting a lot out of these conversations, and thank you so much for your time.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Brandon. It's been so fun.